This is Becky Worley filling in for Leo, and coming up next on This Week in Google, Honeycomb, the announcement. Is it really all that exciting? Plus, Bing versus Google. Google makes some big accusations, but will they come back to bite Google in the butt? Jeff and Gina and a special surprise guest, and will I be able to sit in the shoes on the ball of the big man, so to speak? It's all coming up next on Twig.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for This Week in Google is provided by Cachefly. CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twig, episode 80, recorded February 2nd, 2011. Civil Smackdown. This episode of Twig is brought to you by Carbonite. Backing up the files on your PC or Mac is safe and easy with Carbonite. For a free trial plus 2 free months with purchase, go to Carbonite.com, offer code TWIG. I am Becky Worley, and this is This Week in Google. Joining us, thank God, in Leo's absence, we have the regulars, Gina Trapani from smarterware.org. Gina, welcome.
Hey, how are you? Good to be here.
We watched the Android event earlier this morning and noticed the trend of the T-shirt with the jacket over, and so I really like that you are sporting that look.
Oh, yeah. I broke out the Don Johnson jacket over my HTML5 T-shirt, and it's good.
You are just continuing the fashion trend. Also a fashionista joining us, Jeff Jarvis.
Swoosh.
Apparently sponsored by Nike. Very impressive.
By way to act like I ever sweat and exercise.
Mm-hmm. You all know who Jeff is. He wrote the book, What Would Google Do? And, of course, from buzzmachine.com. Jeff, thanks so much for
good to see you, Becky.
Coming back from the Davos and sharing your wisdom here. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that, and Eric Schmidt making his presence known there. And then we are lucky enough to be joined by Joel Johnson of Gizmodo. Joel, welcome to the show. You and me, we're newbies. Can we handle it?
I think so. And you are very lucky. I appreciate you pointing that out. I didn't know how to bring that up myself.
Okay, good. We will also be talking about Eric Schmidt with you because I loved your post of what Eric Schmidt's TV show might look like if he does actually go into television as his profession. So we'll get to that later in the show. But we want to start with a story that started to break yesterday and it feels like it has some legs in it. Google claims that Bing is copying its search results. So let me see if I can summarize this, and you guys weigh in on this as it happens. So basically what happened is that the folks at Google started noticing that strange misspelled words, and Google takes pride in the idea that their algorithm for finding the correct results for misspelled words is better than anybody else's. So what they noticed was that some strange misspelled words were bringing back on Bing the same results that those same misspelled words were bringing back on Google. And then they started noticing about a month later, and this all kind of started last fall, that the top 10 results for many, many of the pages were getting more and more similar, that there was a huge spike in how similar all the results were for Bing and for Google in the top 10 results. So what Google did is they set up a sting. They basically created a honeypot, if you will, where they created some what they called synthesized search results. They created words that have no meaning, M, Z, Z, V, D, L, R, G, Y, and then they forced results for that word. They told their engineers to go home and using Internet Explorer and the Bing toolbar to try to search for those exact made-up phrases, and then they monitored Bing for those phrases to see what happened, and they found big similarities. So, to the panel, the assertion is Bing copying Google. It's proven. The sting operation proved it. Do we buy that, Jeff?
It sure looks like it. The post on Google, and Google is normally so circumspect, and so we don't talk about our competitors, and we're nice guys, and we like all of them. But it was fairly damning. Well,
Yes.
There's some argument that says that they're just using the data that they get from their browser, and that, so happens that people search Google, and that's how they learn from it. But I don't buy that fully, and I think that for a one-time or 10-time response, it looked pretty suspicious.
Gina, do you think that it's cut and dried, or is this something that's got a lot of wiggle room and that everybody in the industry kind of cribs off each other's notes?
There's a lot of wiggle room here, and I was really surprised by the way that Google, officially and publicly framed this as stealing. I mean, for a company that its entire business is based around analyzing users' clickstream and making, their results and showing them more relevant results, it surprised me that they didn't know that the Bing toolbar was analyzing users' clickstreams and using that clickstream, watching what people click and incorporating that information back into their search results. I don't know. I mean, I think that's kind of standard practice. I could see why Google's upset that those search terms that was so exact that it seemed like such an exact copy. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, this all kind of came out after a rash of articles about how Google search results were becoming less relevant and how Bing was getting so much better. So I kind of wish that Google had said, hey, Bing's getting a lot better because they're using signals from us versus saying they're copying our search results. So I felt like I wish that they would have handled this a little better. They're more aggressive and assertive, and the post was a lot more damning, I think, than it should have been.
Yeah,
I'm putting in a post now. Edwin Lau's, I think his name. You got it wrong. Mm-hmm. Defense of Bing on this, saying just that in Quora. Edmund Lau, who worked on Google Search, is defending him. So I'm putting that on the rundown now. We can put it in the show notes later.
Well, there's been a lot of people who, it's sort of a backlash. Rob Enderle was quoted in a post saying it's crazy for Google to go after Bing like this because so much of their history has been about looking at other people's results. And, in this business, you'd be nuts not to be comparative. And the word that's interesting to me that seems to be pretty loaded is signals. You used it, Gina, that it's just, all of the data points you can collect. And if one of those data points is your competitor's results, where is the ethics line? Where does this get, everybody's got their panties in a bunch. And I don't know if, Joel, you caught this yesterday, this kind of Smackdown that happened at the, what was it? It was the Bing's Future of Search event. And there was a Google guy, Matt Cutts, and then Harry Shum from Bing. And they really kind of got testy with each other.
Yeah, Cutts is an engineer, but he kind of acts as a de facto public PR guy. I honestly don't understand. If I were running Bing and Google was out there and I could just do mass searches within Google and have not a real time, but at least a sort of real time sense of what their returns were. Why wouldn't I incorporate that into my database for my search engine? Like, you can go to get a Google results page right now. It doesn't say copyright at the bottom of Google. Like the results, especially like you were saying earlier, for something that is based around indexing other people's information, I don't see why Google shouldn't be indexing Bing and Bing shouldn't be indexing Google and then weighting all those results to make their engines better.
It's not just the index, Joel. It's the analysis. It's why something appears on top, and that is more proprietary. That is, in fact, the end result.
But they're not copying the. They could sort of reverse engineer the algorithm once they have all the data, they can get an approximation of it. But if they're just grabbing the results of that algorithm, I don't see how there is any problem with that.
Well, that's the peanut butter sandwich. That's it. The results are the value, and I'm trying to think of analogs here.
The analogs are almost every. Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, just saying that if I bring it to your world, if your competitor were reading you all day and just putting your headlines up, or not putting links to you, just taking your scoops and then redoing it, you'd be pissed.
With the ads on the side, getting the ad revenue from it.
You say that like that hasn't happened to me.
I know, that happens constantly.
Yeah, I mean, I would feel a lot more pity for another company besides Google, but Google has built
that's not fair, Joel.
It's totally fair. No, it's not because they're big. It's because they've built their company around indexing the culture. So they've and which is great and valuable, and I think it is a good thing. But this is totally a what's good for the goose is good for the gander sort of situation where they've said for years, we're indexing these books, but we're not going to worry about having to pay the license fees and the whole Authors Guild debacle, which I tended to side with Google on that. But they can't then turn around and say, well, somebody's indexing our information and we're using a proprietary algorithm, so it shouldn't be indexed. The same reason that they feel they have the right to index other people's creations is the same reason they shouldn't complain when somebody indexes theirs.
I also wonder if the metric is a little off here. So Microsoft, in its defense, issued this very oblique statement saying, well, we use thousands of different signals to create our results, and not exactly categorically saying that they don't use Google results. Then Mary Jo Foley pressed them and said, yes or no, do you steal Google's results? And they said, no, we don't steal them. But then when you look at the sting, it seems so black and white. But here's the thing. If they use thousands of signals and there's a made-up word that has no data points on it except for the one data point coming out of the IE Bing toolbar feedback, and these are users who have opted in to share information, then the results are going to be exact because that's the only data point that they're getting on this BS word. So
Exactly.
maybe also the issue is that the sting makes them look guiltier than they actually are.
Well,
The sting is flawed.
That's how Google has positioned this, and that's what Gina, I believe, was saying earlier. Is they do have a legitimate point, and if it's like they took a really good PR opportunity to say, hey, being so horrible that they have to copy our search results just to compete with our engine, and instead, got all freaked out and were like, oh no, Bing, we set up this sting operation. And I think they expected everybody to instantly side with them and be like, oh, how dare Microsoft do that? But again, I feel like a lot of people feel like Google is the last company in the world that needs to make those claims.
And ironically, Microsoft, who used to be the big bad wolf, now everyone's kind of siding with them like, hey, ease off Microsoft. They're just trying to compete. And, the other thing that Rob Enderle said is that the backlash on that front that really may bite Google in the butt is that if their assertions get the attention of federal regulators who are saying, does this mandate that we need to come in here and take a look at this? Does this industry need to be regulated? Google is the last company that wants that kind of scrutiny.
That's true.
Right.
Well, yeah, nobody in the industry wants it.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember too that these signals, quote unquote, are coming from users who have installed the Bing toolbar and essentially agreed to having their clickstream collected and sent back to Bing for feedback. I mean, it's not like Bing is wholesale indexing Google's index by running like bots just running results and pulling back. I mean, these are users who are opting in and saying, hey, I'm going to send you my information. And so Bing is presumably collecting their clickstream from every site that they're on. Not unlike what Google Analytics does. For every website you look at, every modern website is going to have a JavaScript embed in it that's tracking your movements around that site, and that feeds that information back to Google Analytics.
Do you guys think we were going to talk about Eric Schmidt and his appearance in Davos a little bit later in the show? But I think this really relates to the idea that Google is feeling seriously threatened by Microsoft in a way that we all kind of knew but forgot. Does this an offensive?
Well, that's a point, Becky, but I'm not sure that isn't really rhetoric on their part. When asked about Facebook, Schmidt said, again and again, that Microsoft is more of a competitor and lists the ways. That struck me as slightly disingenuous when I heard it.
So, there is no Facebook. Facebook isn't the problem. It's actually that wimpy little kid, Microsoft. Let's focus our attention on how we're walloping them.
Yeah, and it's a way to deflect, I think, a bit and say that Facebook, we do different things. It's okay. Mm-hmm. Are we? We have. If you want to find a competitor for us, it's Microsoft, and then it looks like, and look how we're doing against them.
Right. Interestingly enough, this Bing search event was a place where Google. What's this guy's name? Matt Cutts. Sorry, I'm having a brain fart. He was making a big play to say that Google is doing a better job at avoiding displaying results from copied content. This was a big push that they were making there, that a lot of the search results, and this pertains in some senses to what you guys were talking about last week with the sort of low quality results that were coming back on Google searches, and that one of the problems is so many of the results are copied material and it's not from the original source. And so Cutts was saying that they have changed the algorithm and they think it'll affect about 2% of all search results, but that fundamentally you're going to see the sites that wrote the original content rather than the scraped or the copied site in the original. Is this significant, Gina? Do users really notice this? Do they care?
Well, publishers certainly care, and I think users care. I mean, and Joel can speak to this as well. It sucks when you write a site and they're just all these blogs that just kind of pull your RSS feed, republish. It doesn't look as nice. The links maybe are stripped. The images aren't lined up correctly. It is a worse experience when you go to a blog. That's generally that I've seen. So yeah, I think this is a big deal to users. So hopefully, I think that this is a big thing for the search algorithm, for improving the search algorithm based on time of publish and an original source. But it's tough. I mean, human journalists often don't get the original source correct. So I'll be thrilled if Google can get the Google bot to recognize the original source.
Joel, agreed. Is this a big deal for you?
I mean, it's sort of a big deal, but at Gawker, where I currently work, we pretty much all of our content is under Creative Commons at this point anyway, because we realized after a certain point, it wasn't really worth our time to try to track down 100 or 1,000 different sites that were copying our content. And in fact, kind of my thought has come around to, I didn't think this way forever, that if somebody's going to a site that's stealing my content over and over again, almost everybody's going to realize after a point, through me referencing myself or the site or anything like that, where the original content is coming from. And I just kind of see it as free advertising in a lot of ways. So it's good that Google is going to provide my original link to be the top result, but I don't think it's fundamentally that big a deal.
Right. The big deal today was the Honeycomb announcement. Google HQ, Andy Rubin introduced Hugo Barra, who's big head honcho in mobile, and I'll just try and outline some of these things, and you guys can I'll do play-by-play, and you do the color commentary. So the first announcement was sort of layout and UI improvements in Honeycomb so that it's tablet optimized and that there's going to be different functionality as people try and manipulate and multitask. Jeff, do you think this is significant as it tries to compete with the iPad?
Yeah, I think it was Gina said earlier today that this starts to optimize to the iPad size. One of the most impressive things, not to jump ahead, was that they showed Fruit Ninja in its native Android application showing on a tablet, and it looked great, and it wasn't just double pixeled, it wasn't anything else, it looked great.
Well, but okay, so I just want to stop on that one because I called Google after we all talked because I didn't understand that. How could the pixels not be doubled? Because if it's written in the original Froyo for phones, how is it not just pixel doubling? And they said,
what did they say?
It is. They said
it sure looked great.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's interesting. It looked good, so something's going on there. But they said if it's written in Froyo and it's optimized originally for phones, it's not optimized for tablets. It'll run because it's backwards compatible, but the developer has to go back with the new SDK and then optimize for screen size. But I think your point is well taken. It looked really good.
Here's where we go here. I think that the point is that you can run a lot of stuff that was written for Android phone on Android tablet, and you can optimize for the screen size, but it still works well.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there are things that can take advantage of the size of the screen, and so Android has that. So widgets, which are kind of a gimmick on a phone that I don't think are necessarily that useful, when you have more screen size so that you can, at a glance, see 3 or 4 things that are live and occurring, then that's good. So you can show a snippet of your email and a snippet of your Twitter and a snippet of something else, and you've got a constant view of it because you have the space to do it.
Yeah, and it looked like you could customize that to whatever you wanted for your particular needs.
That, and also the developers can offer you that, and they can stay front and center more, which I think is important.
Right.
That, and they're very proud of doing the 3D video wall, which is one of those moments, as I think Tom said earlier today, you look at it and you say, wow, but then you don't really care again. It helps sell tablets more than anything else.
And talk a little bit about that, because when I was listening, because I was driving in the initial part of the feed when you and Tom and Gina were talking about this, so I was listening to you guys talk about it. So for people who are just listening, the 3D video wall, this is optimized YouTube video? Is that basically what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's just simply that it's I think about a 3x6, and it's round, and as you spin across, the videos refresh very quickly in their images, which also just shows off the fast processor. That's pretty much all it is. It's a gimmick. But again, they're trying to make use of the larger screen in some smart ways. But they said when I was in Davos that this OS is also compatible with 7-inch screens like my nice Galaxy Tab. Which, by the way, I asked them whether Galaxy Tab would be updated. They said that's up to the manufacturer, and they will strongly suggest manufacturers should do that. So Samsung, update it.
That would be a complaint for the if the iOS people would say that you can't force that, and
right. But I think what
like
you have
Sony
now,
Ericsson, which stink at being good at upgrades, that's something that becomes an issue for the user. Are they going to get it?
But last point, and move on to people who really know what they're talking about. I think what you have is because of a vast difference of sizes in Android, what this shows is more flexibility to be able to adapt different sizes. So at CES, as you were there, they have the Android ski goggles, and you have 7-inch tablets and 10-inch tablets and God knows what else in sizes. And without the control that Apple has over those devices and how they operate, Android has to provide more flexibility to developers without having to re-rate things 100 times for 100 sizes. And so what I saw, and I'd love to hear, especially Gina on this one, because she's a developer and I'm not, I don't play one on TV, whether this offers some confidence that if you're going to write for Android, you're not going to be driven nuts having to adapt 100 times.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Because that's one of the whole fragmentation argument is the thing that kind of scares some developers off. Like, things act really differently. And having just released my first Android app a couple of weeks ago, it's really interesting to see all the kind of bugs that come in. It's like, oh, when I flip out my keyboard and change orientation, this happened. It's like, oh, I don't have a flip out keyboard on my device. I have a list of 10 or 11 emulators that I have to check this app in and see what it looks like. So yeah, I think that write once run on the tablet phone is a big deal for developers. The Honeycomb event today was interesting to me. I really feel like they were playing up the Android tablet's strengths, or like Android strengths in general, as compared to the leading tablet on the market now, which is the iPad. So you saw them talking up widgets, right, which the iPad doesn't have. And I disagree with Jeff. I use widgets I hate widgets on my computer desktop, but I love them on my phone. The notifications, which Android's notifications have always been far superior to iOS as far as I'm concerned. And the over-the-air installations, this whole I live a life without wires. We use the internet to update you. And that was the market launch.
So set this up. What was life like before this over-the-air upgrades and downloads, basically where you buy online? So how was it before, Gina?
Well, before you had to visit the Android market on your handset and purchase apps there. Right. So it was Android strength was always that it was over the air. You never had to sync your, you don't have to sync your Android phone to your computer to transfer apps or music. Like you can do those things wirelessly. But the Android market launched today is this web-based version that lets you say, install this to my device in a regular web browser on any device, and then it just shows up on your phone instantaneously, which kind of takes it to the next level. And
I think that's, from a user perspective, when you know what app you want, just going to the marketplace on your phone and grabbing it is genius. But when you're browsing for apps, it's so much better to do it on a computer where you have more screen real estate, you have more responsive sort of, obviously you're going to be somewhere in a Wi-Fi network, and you have better input-output as you're trying to search and find things. So I see the benefit there. And this does seem really seamless and an upgrade over what the iTunes App Store has.
You're right, Becky, but I think I absolutely agree with that. But I want to see even more value added now, in that they show you best selling, most popular, but I really want to see featured. I want to see the three of you recommending things to me, and that's Apple Brain in part, but I also want to see Google recommend things and users' recommendations and more ways to curate the apps, because there is, frankly, more crap in the Android marketplace. Mm-hmm. I'm glad for the freedom. It's worth the price, but that also gives a price to Google to find better ways to curate.
Yeah, and just on that note, Google today announced that they're going to be hiring dozens more Android app development people, which is sort of underwhelming. Dozens sounds so funny when you talk about Google. But, the idea being that, one, they want to create an app lab where they're creating their own free apps, possibly with advertising for distribution, but also they've really made in the last few weeks a big push talking about increasing the quality of the apps that are in the store, having actual humans go through and weed out the ones that are in violation of the terms of service for the marketplace. I think that they're feeling the pressure of the marketplace being more competitive, and I think that speaks to your point.
Yep.
I think there's a real the question in the air, unfortunately, for the Android tablets, which is different from the from iPhone versus Android phones, is it looks to me like, and if you went to CES this year, you saw what, like 100 different Android tablets. Android tablets have gone from basically the Galaxy Tab and a couple other little ones to this commodity product all in a year. And so, Honeycomb is definitely good to have, but I think there's still a big challenge for Google to even get any of those units into people's hands, because in the US, at least, whenever you've gone to buy a phone, unless you were on AT&T, you could only buy, the best smartphone option was Android. Now, if you're going to go buy a tablet, no matter where you're going to buy a tablet, there's also an iPad. So and it's the difference between an iPad and then maybe 4 or 5 different Android tablets. And I still really question whether or not at this stage of the game, people are going to be, no matter how good Honeycomb is, if people are going to look at 4 or 5 different tablets for running Android and 1 iPad, if they're going to see all those Android tablets being devalued mentally because there's so many.
I think the opposite, Joel. I think choice is good.
Is it?
Yeah, sure it is. And I think because it's not just, they'll come in different sizes, they'll have different models, and the thing that I'm waiting for is that I think the whole notion of tablets is itself so limiting. That Android should be powering my car and the back of my airplane seat, and
that's fine. But that, and I don't have any doubt that Android is going to continue to be a success. But I am specifically talking about tablets, and I think if you look at other markets that have been like this, if you look at the auto industry, which to me is like the biggest example that the consumer electronics industry should be paying attention to, because it was a couple of decades ahead, but just collapsed a couple of years ago. Can you say honestly that, like, when you say, I want to buy an American car, was it better to go to GM and have GM and Buick and Chevy and Cadillac and all these different nameplates that basically made the same car, but with just a little tweaks? Or is it better where they're at now, where they sell, one car at this level?
Joel, you're arguing about a point. GM became for a time the largest car company in the world because of that strategy.
And then died because
I didn't like the iPod size. I liked my 7-inch size because of the thumb typing, and I had this choice on Android that Steve Jobs ridiculed. Well, sorry, Steve. I like this.
Right, but this same week, there was news that came out that the 1 to 2 million Galaxy Tab numbers that Samsung has been talking about sales were just shipped sales, not actual sales. In fact, I reached out to Samsung and tried to get an exact unit number, but they didn't get back to me on that. Just
16% is the number that's been bandied about on the return rates, which is obscenely high when you look at the Verizon iPad return rates, which were 2%.
And that's obscenely high relative to an unknown number of actual sales too. So
it's a lot harder to return an iPad than it is.
Is it? I don't think it's any harder to return an iPad. You go to the Apple store and say I don't want it. Okay. Point is, you must personally defend Android, and I will personally defend iPad. But
I'm not doing that so much as I'm disagreeing with. I'm not buying the punchline, so I'm not buying the joke.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But
versus one product versus many products is bad. If that were the case, the Soviet Union would still be around.
In the chat room, they make an interesting point on this, too. Steven, 7 Ohm Meter, he says, I'm still looking forward to the days when we can build our own tablet devices the way we used to or currently build our desktop machines. I don't like being stuck with a device designed by someone else. And I think that there's a schism in the consumer marketplace around this. Is, do you want Steve Jobs, walled garden, one design, what is this Zen principle of omission, and it's going to be this way and this is the way you need to do it? Or do you want fractured environment, many choices, or do you want the ultimate in design flexibility to do it yourself? And is that where we're going? I mean, that would be crazy, but certainly Android is poised to handle it.
It's possible. It doesn't actually cost all that much money to hire a Chinese manufacturing firm to, lay out some chips and build things for you. It takes a lot of money to do that and then also have it be a very quality product.
I was just going to cite the Kmart Kobe experiment for the $179 tablet that came out this Christmas.
Right. Or look at, TechCrunch and all of the drama they had trying to create their tablet. Like it's and not to insult the guy that's in the comments. I don't remember his name, or in the chat room, but that kind of core geek DIY consumer who is the kind of person that reads a lot of the stuff I write and that I constantly am insulting when I say the core geeks person, the people that used to drive the consumer and the computer industry are not the core market anymore. They are a niche market. And so choice and all of that freedom and all of those things, I really do believe are market questions. And even, Jeff and I obviously disagree on the degree to which more choice can eventually be a negative thing. But they actually have when it comes down to being able to build your own things and being able to customize things heavily and all of that, that is increasingly going out of the hands of the consumer.
I agree with you on that, Joel. Yes, but I still think that the internet is all about choice. In my business, in the media business, fewer choices. The controlling people, the people who own media, said this is good because we control it. It's all the best. It's professional. It's wonderful, and they would argue that more choice led to a decline in quality. In fact, I think it led to an increase in quality. I think that Nick Denton has proven that by pushing big media companies to operate differently because there is more choice now and more competition.
Well, that's flattering that you think that Gawker Media produces content that's as good as the big, as big media companies do. And I think in certain ways we do. But at the same time, show me the movie on YouTube that is the same, and I use the word quality loosely, quality as Avatar, right? Like the internet and all of this stuff has diverged. So you have a lot more people at the low end creating good stuff and have more power to create good stuff. And then you have the high end still existing, and the middle's gone away. And all I'm saying relative to the tablet is, and I think we probably should leave it here because I think we're locking horns, is like I think that if consumers who basically only know tablets from the iPad at this point. The iPad's almost the Kleenex of the tablet world. If consumers walk into a Best Buy and there's an iPad and then there's 15 different, Samsung tablets or 15 different Android tablets of different sizes, I think that will be a negative to each of those individual tablet vendors and each of those brands. So I still think that Android may eventually do as well in tablets as it's starting to do in phones, but I do think because people aren't forced to buy a tablet like they're forced to buy a phone at this point, it does change the proposition.
I could kiss you both for having a civil smackdown on my first hosting of This Week in Google. Thank you both. I
know, so gentlemanly, right?
It was.
And Jeff
the chat room was enjoying it.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I wanted to just finish with one more thing about the Honeycomb event. The SDK is going to be live for developers by the end of the quarter. And the last thing that was kind of a big deal was in-app purchasing. And Gina, as a developer, this is a big deal for you. Disney's digital guy, Bart DeCreme, he came up and said that 25 million songs have been downloaded inside of what's it called? Tap Tap, Tap
Tap Revenge.
Tap Tap Revenge. I was going to say revolution, but there's nothing revolutionary about it. It's so old, but that's amazing, and that's all in iOS devices. And so to have that kind of flexibility within the Android marketplace, this is a big deal for developers, right?
Absolutely. It's another way to make revenue on your app, to expand your app, to sell it once and then be able to expand it with new content. It's a great thing. It's a great thing for developers. Developers want to make money. They want to generate revenue. So this is another way to do that.
We are going to take a quick break right now and thank our sponsor, Carbonite. This backing up the files on your PC or your Mac, that's what Carbonite's all about. I am going to use many of my references from my own life. Number one, I am a bum about backing up. And I have videos, hundreds and thousands probably of my kids that I should be backing up. I have all of the documents that run my life. I should be backing them up. Well, that's what Carbonite's for. And now drawing on another reference, do you guys know that one of my other beats in life is reviewing infomercial products? Oh, yes. This nice. is it's glorious for me, but set it and forget it is one of the sort of cornerstones of the infomercial pitch, and that is the Carbonite pitch. Once you set it, it happens automatically in the background, and they will back up all the files, as I said, Mac or PC, and the price is right, $55 a year, 15 cents a day. And if you've ever lost files on a hard drive and had to think about getting them restored, it costs so much more than that, so much more. So we have an offer for you. It's try it for free. You can get, let me see, I think it's 2 free months on Carbonite. And what you'll do is you'll go to Carbonite.com, enter the offer code TWIG. You'll get 2 months free with that offer code. if you decide to buy the service after the trial. So go check it out. Again, it's carbonite.com, and the offer code is TWIG. And we thank them immensely for their sponsorship here on the show. Now we want to...
Becky, can I break in one more thing from what I saw Hugo Barra's show at Davos?
Oh, yeah.
Showing off the stuff to the press there. And maybe this is old. If it is, stop me. But it was a wonderful moment of tying together translation and voice so that you could have two people who were talking and finally demonstrate this. I've been talking about wanting to do this, where I can say a sentence in English. It will then type it out in German. You hit the button and it speaks it in German. The other person says this sentence in German. It types it out, hit the button, it speaks it in English.
Wow.
And Eric Schmidt said, this is going to stop World War III.
What was your sense of the quality of the translation?
Very good. Very good. And it's the same translation we see. I mean, there's nothing terribly new here, except they just put the pieces together. They have the voice recognition, they have the speech, text-to-speech, and they have the translation.
And they have the desire to stop World War III.
That they do. Yes, they do.
Well, this might be... What else did you see at Davos that you thought was compelling on that line? Because I think this is also an interesting segue into the speak-to-tweet service that Google was getting involved in to help Egyptians when they were cut off from the internet.
Why don't you go straight there? Because I think that's a fascinating project. I can tell you, I talked to Google folks about that as well.
Why don't you set it up for us, Jeff? Tell us a little bit about it. This happened, the internet has been restored somewhat in Egypt as of now, but for 5 days, 6 days, it was out. And to give voice to people who were denied Twitter, Google and Twitter and another company set up a phone number, right? Right.
SayNow was acquired by Google last week by chance. And it was set up to allow Ashton Kutcher to give up the horrible task of typing, and that he could come in and just leave a tweet by voice, and people would say, "Oh, Ashton's speaking to me," and then they could listen to him. So they came along, and over the weekend, people from the three companies, as you say, or two in the sense that SayNow is now owned by Google, sat down and came up with a means for people to record tweets in Egypt. They don't have a local Egyptian number. I'll tell you about something else in a minute that does. And then it just goes up and it's an audio tweet. But then there was crowdsourcing of transcription and I believe translation as well. So someone from Google told me that they're doing 1 to 2 a minute as of yesterday, which considering they have to call to Bahrain or Italy or the U.S. is fairly surprising. And that you can now, the New York Times is listening to this, you get to hear the voice. It really becomes a fascinating thing. What I love about, what I hate about this story is that we have found the single point of failure of the internet. It's government.
Kill switch.
Schmidt's been saying this for a long time, and there was at least two kill switches. One is the ability of government to tell companies to just turn it off and block services, and the second is DNS. If Libya falls, Bitly better be nervous. And so Libya has already cut off services. So the single government as single point of failure of internet is a very frightening thing for our future culture all across. I was talking to the CTO of the World Economic Forum about, should we fear, if you're in Russia today and you fear this is going to happen there, what do you do now? And he said, well, China and Russia, if they cut off the internet, would cut off a huge part of their economy. Egypt, not so much so. But I'm fascinated by how the internet was built to go around blockages. With no internet, culture is now built to go around blockages. So the fact that this Twitter device was created, Huffington Post created local numbers with Skype in Egypt so people could call in and leave messages. I suggested they should also put up news reports because Al Jazeera was cut off and news was cut off. So they did the same thing. An Egyptian could call a local number and get a news report. The fact that people have been faxing out, they've been relaying, through things like ham radio.
Dial-up modems came back.
God, where the hell is my acoustic coupler? I might need it when the revolution comes. So all these things, you find hope in culture that we will now root around blockages even to the internet itself. But the fact that the internet was cut off, the bigger issue here, I think, is that this shows the true definition of net neutrality. This shows the true need to believe that the right to connect is a fundamental human right. And when it is cut, it is a violation of human rights. And so Google tried very hard not to be political about this, and they're not. They said specifically to me, we're not saying anything about Mubarak, we're not saying anything else, but they've used the technology to allow people to continue to connect and speak, and that's a wonderful thing.
I think even the late night comedians got into this. They didn't quite have the passion that you do about it being a fundamental right. But Conan O'Brien said that if you want people to sit around and do nothing, turn the internet back on. For God's sake.
I put up a question. I came back from dinner one night, right when all this Egypt stuff was starting to happen, and they were starting to shut down the connections. And I put up a post on Gizmodo that basically said the same thing as you just said, Jeff. I asked the readership, is internet access a human right? And, I think it was pretty obvious from the subtext that I agree pretty much with you from the way I wrote it. But I was shocked at the responses that I got from people. I'd say at least half of the people, but maybe a majority of people said internet is not a human right. And it kind of got mired in some capitalist arguments, which I didn't
exactly.
Not quite what I was trying to make. But yeah, it was very frustrating to me, and I was surprised how many people said essentially that they didn't view internet access as being fundamental. And I think that there's I actually agree with you 100% on the way you feel about it, but I also think there's a rough road to hoe to convince the rest of the world that we need to have some guarantees in place, because you're fighting
Joel,
not just.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah,
in terms of the discussion, what I'm seeing, see if it was the same for your discussion, is that people jump to the next step and say, aha, by saying it's a fundamental human right, then government's going to provide the internet access. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that, just like I've got free speech means I have to maybe buy the newspaper or buy the book, but I have a right to do so, and no one's going to destroy those things.
Right. There was definitely a socialism versus capitalism argument that people were trying to put in there, which is not at all what concerns me. Because if it's socialism, the government can cut it off. If it's capitalism, businesses can cut it off. My point is that nobody should be able to cut it off.
Amen, brother.
So I mean,
we agree.
They're agreeing.
Yeah.
It does seem like a fundamental tenet of democracy is just that's became so clear to me in all of this is that, the internet is just, it's synonymous these days. If you don't have a free flow of information, going back to the speak to tweet thing, so Mubarak does his taped speech saying he's not going to run for re-election. We're dependent upon old media for the images because there's no sort of unfiltered, disintermediated flow of information coming out of Egypt. So that's when I turned to speak to tweet to try and get a sense of, okay, what's the reaction like? What's it really like? And not be dependent upon ABC and NBC and CNN. And that was where it was really helpful. And I thought, God, this is just such a crucible and such a way to see how this is all playing together in a very short amount of time, in a very it's totally explicit that what you guys are saying in the tenet of democracy is fundamentally tied to the internet.
And that's what they showed in Davos, that if I could put up a tweet and I could now tweet it across 20 languages, which they haven't done yet.
Right.
They haven't even done speech recognition yet. But all this becomes very close. The whole translate thing has changed me and surprised me. I speak 1.1 languages. I speak German really, really badly. And I'm now spoiled by Google Translate because rather than, give myself a headache and trying to go through, I'll just hit the button and I'll be close enough. But I also see that if somebody writes about something I say or something I'm interested in Norwegian or Polish or Russian, I'm no longer scared of that. It's no longer apart from me. Yeah. I can now, in an instant, get a sense of it. And that's I think, more profoundly changing than we yet know. Global village time, group hug time.
Gina, you were pointing out kudos to Google, and do you think that this is a good way for Google to sort of kind of brush off some of the icky China feel and go for something that's a straight democratic play in some place where they could make an impact?
I think so. I was actually saying kudos to Google for launching this on Twitter and not saying, well, we're going to do it on Buzz.
Yeah, you're right, Gina.
That kind of thing. But yeah, this is the kind of thing that makes me feel good about Google and keeps me the Google fangirl that I am. I think it was definitely.
It also speaks a little bit to the reasons why Google has been trying to push so hard, at times push hard on the white spaces initiative to try to set up a wireless infrastructure that doesn't rely on other companies or other companies, even within the U.S. But unfortunately, all of this stuff ends up routing back through backbones, and until we get some sort of crazy handheld, powerful mesh network sort of thing, it's always going to be possible for the next foreseeable future. For people to shut down the internet, and that's scary.
Moving sort of in a strange segue, Google is saying that they're also lashing out against the dominance of one company that's sort of big brother in Apple. And with this I'm moving into their teaser for their Super Bowl ad. Can you play a little bit of that, Jammerby? Do you have any of that? See if you can pull it up. I'll see if I can get you a link. But basically, it's in the Google spreadsheet. If you can grab the Google Doc. Sorry, bud. It says "Goodbye 1984." Have any of you guys seen this yet?
I haven't seen it.
You have, Gina?
I have not. I'm loading it up right now.
I actually saw it just right before, yeah.
So it's just sort of interesting in that it sort of plays on, this is not 1984, the dominance and the one person controlling all things. And I don't think this is their Super Bowl ad, but it's a teaser to it. And I found it really interesting that they chose this venue to really go after Apple. Gina, what did you get after you watched it? Or sorry, Jeff, what did you get after you watched it?
Yeah, I think you said it well. I think it's just trying. We've noticed this irony before that Apple was the anti-IBM 1984 monolith, and now Apple is the monolith, and you wonder if that becomes a natural life cycle.
Yeah, and it's sort of good guy, bad guy, all of that. Oh, you got it queued up, Jammerby?
This is Jeff and Joel's conversation right here. Choice versus.
Yes, you're right.
It really is.
Except at the end of the day, I feel like they're both big companies, so you can't really ultimately trust either one to completely be on your side.
You see, that's where your prejudice is coming out, Joel. I knew it, commie you.
Well,
commie.
I mean, all companies, it's just the way it goes.
2011, we've got a space scene here for those of you who are listening, not watching. It's counting backwards to 1984, and there's a planet with two very Apple-esque earbuds.
White earbuds.
Sticking into it. One authority. One design. One way to work. It's time for more choices. More speed, dual-core 1 gigahertz processor, 1080p HD video playback, 3G upgradable to 4G, more speed, more flexibility, Honeycomb, Adobe Flash, front and rear-facing cameras, more freedom. Big red ball. You get the idea.
Big red ball. We all want to move to Mars.
So that's from Motorola, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
see, that's such crap. I'm sorry. Like, there is choice. Like, if people, it's not like there wasn't a choice whenever the iPod came to dominance. Like, people just bought more iPods for a variety of reasons, because it was good, because it was trendy, because they had good marketing, because iTunes worked well. Like, there's all these things, but there was never not a choice to use another MP3 player. They were always on the market. So it just torques me so badly whenever Google or any of their partners or anybody tries to espouse this whole choice thing, as far as you don't have to use Apple. You can use, Google. You've always been able to use them. That's not, if they want to talk about choice, they should talk about
to the extent that it's the same about Google. Right, that people say Google's a monopoly. It's not, and Eric Schmidt says that there is a perfectly good alternative for everything Google does, except perhaps find advertising everywhere. But its freedom, I think, is an appropriate description, competitive description for Android versus iOS.
Yeah, and
This commercial is about the launch of the Google tablet. Okay, I mean the Galaxy Tab is not their official tablet. I mean, I don't think. I mean, you really didn't have that much of a choice. There really isn't a viable tablet. Like, this is kind of the first Google tablet, right, coming out with Honeycomb. So I think that's what this commercial is about. It's a launch commercial.
I mean,
what's
like
that?
It's just analogous to that time.
I know that's silly. Like, why would you go back to 1984 to say, like, well, there hasn't been a choice in portable
tablets
since
all we had at the time, young man. Since I was around and you were in diapers at best. God,
I wasn't in diapers when I was in diapers when I was 6 years old, but there's no one who would have known that.
we had CPM was gone. Remember that? You don't.
Is that
and all we had was PCs, right? And so Gina's right. When I was at Davos, I said something about getting Honeycomb on my machine, and they did say to me, "It's just a really large phone, Jeff."
Now,
so we didn't have a choice, and now we do have more choice. I'm amazed by this, Joel, that you have this this anti-choice thing.
Well, the word fanboy has been said in the chat room. I mean, I'm not calling you out, Joel, because you and me are both newbies.
I've gotten a lot worse than fanboy. I can take fanboy, but the thing is that I do want to underscore. Like, I think Honeycomb looks awesome. I'm actually considering moving a lot of my mobile stuff away from iOS to Android. I mean, I keep Android phones around to use and be familiar with and stuff like that. But I'm considering moving my personal stuff over to it. I think it looks great. When I say I have questions about the success of Android in X category, I'm not saying that I think Android is inferior at this point. I think anybody would be silly to make that argument. I'm saying that I think that all of that choice can be just as much of a detriment as a benefit. That's really my only point.
Well, new numbers came out yesterday from Nielsen just to sort of underscore the points being made here. And I think it's really interesting because this is the classic three-way tie is going on right now between the phone operating systems. So Apple, 28% of market share. Android, 27%. RIM, 27%. But here's the interesting one. 43% of all smartphone users were activated, of new smartphone users were activating Android phones. And Google says now they're activating 300,000 new devices a day, up from 200,000 in August. So, I mean, the trends are clear that, choice of carrier, choice of device, choice of input-output mechanism, whether you have a virtual or a physical keyboard, those are things that are certainly, and price. I mean, price points. So many of these Google phones, the Galaxy S series, were free or a cent over the fall and winter purchasing time periods. And the other trend that came out in this is smartphones in general, huge jumps for non-whites. Asian Pacific Islanders, 45%. Hispanics, 45%. African Americans, 33%. Whites was 26% own a smartphone. And I think that is hugely important as we see the growth of this category and the decision about whether it's going to be Apple or whether it's going to be Android. Do you guys agree?
Critically important. And I think that it's said that the next 3 billion people who come online in the world will come online through phones. Yeah. And I think what the device shows, and Murdoch even said this today at the Daily, which we'll talk about later, that what we're really seeing is the death of the laptop, and we've heard that before. But even Rupert could get that line, and so the connectivity that we're going to have, the connectivity that's going to matter in places like Egypt, is going to come from smartphones, and that there's a skip that's occurring here. There are a lot of people in the world that are going to leapfrog over PCs.
And these are just U.S. numbers, Jeff. I mean, that's what's crazy. I mean, It's definitely the trend starts here as much as it continues in other countries. But I just found that fascinating. I think you're totally right.
My friend, colleague Matt Buchanan at Gizmodo, he and I were talking about trying to work on a piece a couple of weeks ago about basically, what are minorities using for their smartphones? Because when the Sidekick was really starting to take off on T-Mobile, in New York at least, and I mean, this is all anecdotal for me, but I just saw tons of black people using Sidekicks, way more than I saw white kids using Sidekicks. And I thought it was really interesting. It's like, okay, there's this huge trend within a certain demographic of using a certain phone that I feel like the predominantly white tech press or whatever doesn't pay attention to. And so, yeah, it's interesting to try to follow those trends across and say, okay, what are the different demographics and ethnic groups and races and things like that use within the U.S., but then can you or how do you extrapolate? Well, you can't really extrapolate it with that from the U.S. to the rest of the world, but how do you try to design a product for that for the rest of the world? And I definitely think, Android's is in really good shape to be localized a lot more specifically to different cultures and different groups.
I think it would be really fascinating to see if you could break down the data and see how many of those people, those quote unquote minorities, also what their access to home computers are. And I bet that it would be considerably less than whites who don't have smartphones but use their laptops a lot more. So I think that's, it's definitely a trend in a certain direction.
I would
go ahead, Joe.
I'm sorry. I've always had this pipe dream that I would love to know all of the ways that everybody accesses the internet at all times, because I think I have a really good sense of it because of what I do and because I pay attention to it. But I run into stuff all the time where I realize, like I met a girl a few months ago who
Congrats.
just lives out. Yeah. Don't worry. It's over now. I'm available. she lived off her iPhone. I'd never known anybody who basically didn't use a computer and only used a smartphone.
Yeah.
And I realized then, and not just on the smartphone a lot, but that was her computer. And just seeing that, like, individually in a real person completely blew my mind. And I know that there's lots of use cases out there like that a lot of us that are steeped in tech don't necessarily see.
I'm going to jump us ahead and just kind of slam through some of the other interesting things that are happening in Google this week. One of the most visual is Google announced that they have a new art project that brings street view technology to some of the best art museums in the world. You can, as if you were walking down a street in Street View, you would be walking down the halls of the Uffizi, of the Tate, of the all kinds of, the MoMA. It was amazing, the list of museums that they have. And as you walk down the halls, you can click into certain paintings that you want more information on, and then they have incredibly high-res photos. And you can really get down to the detail of just seeing, what all the edges and the ridges of the oil in the oil paintings are. I thought this was such an amazing use of the technology in ways that really will be fantastic for students and anybody who's planning a trip. This is so cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's such a good use of the technology. The fact that you can see the cracks and the strokes in the Starry Night, like last night I was zoomed really far into Starry Night. It was amazing. It's like you get to put your nose right up against a painting, that's in a museum or on the other side of the world. Really cool project.
Yeah, and if you were trying to figure out if I could go to one museum, which one would it be? You'd get to sort of do a virtual tour before you had to make the decision.
Yep.
Another cool story, physicist Stephen Wolfram Alpha guy. I can never say it right. Wolfram Alpha guy. He says that Google would beat Bing if they played Jeopardy together. Oh, yeah. So in his test, Google got 69% of the Jeopardy answers correct. Ask.com got 68%, and Bing got 63%. Now, in context, he says the average human contestant gets 60% of answers correct. Ken Jennings, the Jeopardy Zen master, has a 79% success rate. Wikipedia, guess.
Oh, oof. 23.
You cribbed the notes. It's
terrible. I did. I totally cribbed the notes. Bing's really got to work on their signal gathering.
Yeah, see, if they were direct copying, it wouldn't be, maybe this is in defense of Bing. I don't know. We'll have to see it.
My friend Steve Baker, ex-Business Week, is writing the book about Ken Jennings and the other Jeopardy star against IBM's Watson. And he's releasing it in a very interesting way where you can buy the book now. You get the first 11 chapters. And then he's writing the 12th now, which is about after the contest. And then you get the whole book.
Oh, very cool. A couple other stories we need to dig into here. Let's see. Google Docs getting a priority inbox. Finding and sharing documents easier. Gina, you think this is a boon?
Yeah, it's a little better. I'm still sort of confused by Google Docs. It's just kind of like list of documents. So you have, my coworker was saying, I have my sister's resume next to my proposal for work. It's strange. But this new update is pretty cool. It makes labels and folders, so you can have. You can organize your documents in collections, I think they're calling them, and your a doc can appear in a couple different collections. So there's sort of like folders that also have the benefits of labels, and they've also got this priority sort. So in the top right-hand corner, you can sort by priority, and I think the priority is just kind of determined by the activity on a particular doc. So, today my Twig rundown kind of floated to the top of my Google Docs list because you all were editing it. So yeah, it's an improvement. It's not, I still want to see more of this kind of thing in Google Docs. I still feel like Google Docs is just this pile of stuff from every different context of my life.
And then in sort of this productivity vein, Gina, continue on in terms of talking about the interoperability for Windows customers, HTML5, Windows Media Player extension for Chrome.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting. So a couple weeks ago, we talked about how Google Chrome officially dropped support for H.264, playing H.264 video when it's specified an HTML5 video tag. Well, Microsoft has sort of jumped up and said, oh, we'll fill that gap. And they're offering an extension for Chrome on Windows 7, which will play that video. So I found this fascinating that Microsoft is making a Chrome extension, which does a thing that Google sort of officially dropped and created this whole sort of kerfuffle in the community about dropping support for a video codec that they would have played by default. So no worries, you will be able to play. I mean, we knew that someone was going to come up with an extension or an add-on. It's interestingly it's Microsoft. I believe this HTML5 extension for Chrome is for Windows only though. So I'm sure someone will come out with it for Mac as well, if not Microsoft.
Didn't that announcement make it feel like it was 2011 to you? Like it was just such a strange announcement that Microsoft was writing a plugin for a competitor's browser that allowed, basically Apple's, championed video format to run. I thought the whole thing was really surreal.
It is kind of weird and surreal, but it's also Microsoft saying here's a way for us to get Windows Media Player onto your Windows PC, or to update it or get some sort of component onto your machine, because this is something that you're going to want.
I have a fundamental question for you, Gina, which is the kind I usually have for you. In the discussion 2 weeks ago about H.264 and Chrome, how open is Chrome and how open is Chromium? Would you say?
Well, how open, like in terms of as an open source project?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's Chromium, which is the open source project, and then there's Chrome, which is Google's sort of distributed user product. I actually haven't looked at. I'm not sure what Chromium's release schedule for the actual code is. I don't know if it's like Android, where they kind of work on it, not in secret, but internally, and then they do this big release kind of later on, or if it's consistently open. I believe that the Chromium open source project is sort of consistently open, although I hope somebody in the chat room will correct me. Why do you ask?
Well, partly for the book I'm working on is trying to see the areas in which Google is open and closed and open and closed, and it's always a mix. Same with Apple. If you're not
right. Yeah, it's Google. Google. There's it's open source when we release it 2 months after consumers get it. Yeah.
Is that
I'll double check that for
Chromium,
you.
The browser, Chrome the OS.
Well, there's Chromium. There's Chromium, the open source project, and then there's Chrome, the distributed browser, and then there's Chrome OS, which is
Chrome OS open at all?
Well, it's based on the Chromium project, so it's powered by the Chromium project. Okay, so yeah, it's all.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Sure.
Jeff, a few months back, you suggested a Gadget of the Month club on BuzzMachine.com. And now you say Best Buy is acquiescing to your need?
It's an interesting variation on this where we'll put this up on the show rundown. Barry Judge, who's the chief marketing officer at Best Buy, blogged this today that I had asked for was that I want to buy I've pulled up 3 times already my Galaxy Tab, but I
like
also
it when you pull it up because I can see outside of your window at how outrageously icy and cold it looks.
Snowy it is. Yes, it is. I'll turn the camera around in a second. And so I'm stuck with it for 2 years, right? And I wanted to have some kind of system where I could join the Gadget of the Month club, and I would pay a premium for getting something right away, or I might pay less for getting something later. And I blogged about it and said to Best Buy, "Are you listening?" I'm not suggesting that I had any role in this, but they just announced a buyback procedure, and it's a very clever way for them to make money. Let's be very clear about this. But you buy, the other example, an iPhone, and you pay $60, which gives you the privilege then to have it bought back depending upon how long you have it. So 6 months later, they'll pay you 50% for it. There's a rather rapid depreciation, but if you say 1 year later, they will pay 40%.
But
right?
up front, so you can take that as a known
exactly
quantity.
What the price is.
Right.
It's an exact percentage, exact price. So that I could now say, and I bought my Galaxy Tab on T-Mobile, which Best Buy doesn't sell. And I know that I'm going to get frustrated with this. So if I bought it on Verizon at Best Buy, I could. $60 is a lot of money to buy into this thing, but it's a lot better than their fakakta, warranties I never use. I could give myself the guarantee of upgrading to the next thing. And I asked them today, well, what does this do with things like early penalties and all that? And they said that if you upgrade within the same company's plan, it'll just pass right over.
Wow.
So if I'd gotten the Galaxy Tab and said on Verizon, or I think they have it in Sprint there at Best Buy, and I paid this fee, they would buy it back from me in 6 months for 50%, and or 1 year for 40%. It goes up to 2 years at 20%, and then I could buy the next thing. I could buy the Honeycomb Tab and be happier.
So basically, if you're an enthusiast who's on a different schedule than the upgrade schedule, this is a way to sort of amortize the cost or mitigate it to some extent, at least so you know it in advance. I mean, we have Gazelle as one of our sponsors, and you would send your phone back to them, but you know it's a different model because you would then find out at the time that you send it back to them how much you would get.
It's kind of consumer-based obsolescence.
Right.
Sunlight. I'm red. Hold on.
Oh, no. There you are. Hello.
Oh, no. I'm white. I'm half white. I'm a strawberry sundae.
It's all right. We need some diversity on this show. It's fine. Yeah. Bring whatever color you have.
I'm the guy to give it to you.
Yeah, that's you.
Barry Judge from Best Buy also said that maybe what comes next is leasing. Now, the weird thing about this is it's kind of obnoxious American forced early obsolescence, right? Rather than using this thing through its full life. So I buy another one. Look at Leo's closet. Well, obviously, I presume, I haven't asked them yet, Best Buy has an aftermarket for this stuff. And they're going to make profit on this. And I'm going to be able to get the latest, greatest things. And it's a small market for this, but I really kind of like the idea.
Yeah, I think it's very cool. And, just giving consumers a choice. I'd have to do the math to really figure out where the break even is. But
that seems like that's the weak spot is just.
It's not a great deal. No, you're right.
It's not a great deal. And it's also, you got to really make a lot of judgments about what the value of your product on the open market is going to be in a year before you even buy the $60 into the plan. $60 might be your entire profit margin for reselling something. So,
which is exactly the problem with leasing, right? If I buy a car with a low turnback value, so you're right. They're arbitraging our risk, whether you do our beloved sponsor or try to sell it yourself on eBay or do this buyback plan or do a lease. What it says is there's an option for me not to be stuck with a device. And as technology rapidly improves, I think it's good for the industry too, because what are television manufacturers doing now? They're desperate to convince us that 3D is the next must-have thing. And it ain't working. But there are better TVs. There is this, there is that you might want to upgrade, and it's nice to have that option. But you're absolutely right, Joel. The risk now moves to us.
Webby in the chat room says Best Buy resells on eBay just like Gazelle does. So there you have it. Gina, what's your tip of the day?
Tip of the day. Well, real quick, Jeff asked if Chromium was truly open source. It is. I'm browsing the source control repository. There's a commit 14 minutes ago. So it is completely public, open source. And there's also a Chromium project and a Chromium OS project, and that Chrome and Chrome OS come out of. Just want to clarify that.
Nicely done.
My tip of the week is another Gmail tip. Last week we talked about the unread message icon on your browser tab. That's kind of a subtle way to keep track of how many emails you're not reading. But this week there's another Gmail setting. In settings, they've got this little notification icon that comes up. It's kind of like the toaster on Windows, or if you run Growl on Mac. It's just a little flash that comes up when you receive a new message on the spot. So if you go into your Gmail settings, it's a mail notification. So you can set your mail notifications on. You can say just notify me if mail in my priority inbox shows up, and you can also do the same for chat. So little flash notifications if you want to drive yourself crazy watching email, getting interrupted watching email come in every time.
Respond immediately.
I don't necessarily endorse this, but just in case.
Jeff, what's your number of the week?
Number of the week is $30 billion. That's how much Rupert Murdoch said today that the News Corp put into developing The Daily, which is their new, so far, iPad-only app. At Buzz Machine, my humble blog, I went through the economics of this because there are only two facts that he gave us on the economics. One is that they cost $30 million to develop, but they've already written that off, which is to say that he doesn't care if he makes that back.
Wow.
And the second is that it will cost roughly $500,000 a week to operate. Oh. Now you add those two together, and you have a $55 million cost for the first year. And that ain't peanuts, folks. Portfolio magazine, may it rest in peace, went through and what I thought was $40 million. Others say $100 million. The Project Alicia, which was supposed to be a News Corp aggregator, went through $30 million before it was killed. So this is a hefty investment. And I talk a lot on the show about paywalls and such, and Murdoch is charging 99 cents a week, or $40, $39.99 a year for this. And so in the blog post, I'm asking people to help me try to figure out the numbers of this, because it gets a little complicated. It's not as simple as saying that he needs 500,000 subscribers paying $1 a week, and that equals $500,000 profitable. It's almost that simple, but there's churn, people leaving. There's a marketing cost to getting this. There's Apple's 30% share, and he said in public that Apple, I'm surprised at this. You'd think that Apple would be so into hugging him right now that they would have negotiated, and they didn't for the first year.
Wow.
So Apple's still taking a 30% share of the subscription rates, and I assume of the advertising as well. And you look at the numbers that he has to hit, I'm figuring he has to net at about 750,000 subs. And these are really, really figure into the air numbers. Be very clear about that. Which means he probably has to sell about 1 million with churn. I guess my numbers are way out of date, but the last number I saw for iPad sales was 7.6 million. Others said that it's more than that, but it's a 10% market share. And compare that to Wired, which sells 22 issues a month, 22,000 issues rather, but that's down 20% a month over 2 months. Glamour is down 20% a month over 2 months to 2,775. So Murdoch has to sell, in round numbers, 35 times as many as Wired sells to reach this level of profitability.
My number is 6 months. 6 months. And
before
then,
what?
well, before it goes away quietly with tail between leg.
I would be accused of wishing for the same thing. People came in and said, oh, you're being anti-Murdoch again. People actually read my post and said, no, I'm not. I'm just reasonably asking questions that I hope journalists will ask and answer, and people who can do spreadsheets, unlike me. Possibly. I mean, listen, if I'm not against charging for content, I'll sell you my book happily. And if Murdoch succeeds, that's another realm, and that's exactly. Thank you very much. Available on Kindle and audio. And so if he succeeds, fine, good. I'm not against that at all. I'm just dubious whether it can, but I want to understand the economics of this. I want to know what's going to go on. I want to watch it very carefully. The other issue is content an application? Is the application good enough? I don't have an iPad, so I can't see it yet. I unfortunately couldn't go last night.
It looks great. I mean, I downloaded it. It looks fantastic. It's, visual. I like the UI. Tom has complained that the update schedule is not robust enough for him, that it's just once or twice a day.
That's ridiculous.
But, and I have friends who are working there right now that have gone from old media and are really excited to learn there. And if I had if I was in their position and had the opportunity to go do that, it would be like, hey, if you've got the money, I've got the time. Like, hey, that's like digital J school for me. I'll go. And I think a lot of people who are working there feel that way. And I don't know. The metrics on this are unbelievable, and I think you're questioning the number is the right tack, because sure, it's beautiful, sure, it looks great. That's not the business model. You know?
And so I know, Gina, you don't have an iPad to do this on, right?
Nope. I was like, what's this? Oh, something I can't look at. Okay.
But then again, where's the Android app?
No, you have an iPad because that's all you want in the world is the one thing, and you're done now.
Don't start it up again.
How do you like it, Joel? Have you seen the Daily?
I actually sold my iPad. I don't have it at the moment.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm absolutely serious. I don't have an iPad. I wish I had an iPad. Because they're for reading mostly. That's what I miss it for. But no, I haven't looked at it. I think the Daily's going to be, your Android tablets are going to help the Daily a lot, because a lot of the Android tablets are not going to have as many options for that sort of reoccurring, big money media push for their devices. But Rupert has already said he's planning on pushing stuff out to Android relatively soon. So
and maybe that's why they're not getting the discount from Apple.
Yeah,
but he said something odd. He was asked about that, and he said that that the iPad was last year's, this year's, and next year's technology. Now, I don't know if he meant that just culturally or contractually.
Interesting.
I couldn't tell.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to wrap it up this week with Leo's Tool of the Week. And I think I really need to side with Joel and be the iOS person, the voice of iOS, to maybe be even out the panel here.
Oh, don't be that person.
Oh, I shall. But I'm bringing it all together in a sense of unity and world peace.
Right.
Because the Google Shopping app has just been released for iOS. And I downloaded it. And it's great. I mean, as a consumer reporter, I love this kind of stuff. It has an image search, so I could just do a quick scan of the cover of Jeff's book, and it would give me all the prices online and locally, and then has a voice search. Check this out. Okay, speak now. Pampers. Oh, shoot. I always do that. Voice search. Pampers size 5. And look at that. It's pulling up.
You have a 6-year-old?
I have 2 3-year-olds. Luckily, they're not in that size anymore. But yeah, it did a great job. Pulled it up. Pampers size 5. Like, really? So you can do it with voice. You can do it with images. And if you're a shopaholic or professional shopper as I am, Google Shopper. That is my tool of the week. Hey, I really want to thank you guys for bearing with me in Leo's absence.
You're great.
And had a great time.
You're
Jeff,
great, Becky. Thank you.
Thank you all. And you know what I'd like to do as we close is give us your Twitter handle, because I think it's, we've mentioned the sites that you have, but Gina Trapani, where can we find you on the Twitter?
I am at Gina Trapani on the Twitter. Very difficult to guess.
Yes.
Very creative username.
I like it. Jeff Jarvis?
Jeff Jarvis.
Nice. And Joel
We have
Johnson?
no imagination. Joel's going to beat us now.
Yeah, mine's I sold my iPad.
Last word.
Mine's Joel Johnson. I mean, that's all it is.
Nice. And I am B. Worley, Worley on Twitter. And thank you all. And thanks to Carbonite for sponsoring the show. Take care, all. See you next week on This Week in Google.